Hi everybody, and welcome to my brand new YouTube channel. If you're wondering what this channel is going to be about, it's going to be all about football, and it's particularly going to be about, as you I'm a West Bromwich Albion supporter, and it'll be about them during the next season. For my first video, to introduce myself, I'm going to upload a series of videos about history of the football teams of the 1970s, 60s, and the 70s. This first video will be about the history of Leeds United. Right, let's get started, shall we? The history of Leeds United. Let's start with when Don Revie became Leeds United's manager from 1961 to 1974. Leeds United, through those decades of the 60s and 70s, they became a most feared team in the old First Division. They were called Dirty Leeds United because of the way they played and the players they've got. But if you're a young football supporter who supports a big Premier League team, what I suggest you do is you look at some of the old YouTube videos of the glory days of Leeds United, when they were the most dominant team in the old First Division, and you'll be amazed at the skill and the goals that those Leeds United players scored. In those days, Leeds United had great players. They had goalkeeper Gary Spray. He was a Welsh international. They had Paul Madeley, Terry Cooper, and Billy Brenmer. And Billy Brenmer, he was a total footballer, but he used to put his foot into other players. I think he was sometimes he was a dirty so and so, but he was a great player. And then we had Jackie Charlton, Norman Hunter. They used to call him Norman Bite Your Legs Hunter because he was a proper footballer. He never gave opponent's player any peace. He used to go in hard, the hard tackles. And then you had Peter Lorimer. Boy, could he smack a football. Some of the goals he scored from free kicks and outside the box was quite spectacular goals he used to score. And then they used to have Alan Clark. They used to call him Sniffer Clark because he was always in the right place and the right time to score goals. And then you had Mike Jones, the centre forward. He was an underrated player, but he used to get the goals for Leeds. And then used to have the midfield general, Johnny Giles, the little Irishman. He used to play. Used to play for Manchester United until they sold him to Leeds. And then, of course, you used to have the winger Eddie Gray, who was a great crosser of the ball. Those players who used to play for Leeds at that time, they were a golden age of players, and they were fearsome. Leeds were then in the 60s and the 70s. They used to go. They used to be challenging for every trophy. The old First Division trophy they've won. They've won that twice, and also they've challenged for in Europe. They won the old Fairs Cup and the League Cup. They won that in 1968, beating Arsenal in the final. And they also challenged for the European Cup. Uh, they were they used to challenge on all fronts. Leeds. Celtic beat them in the semi-final of the European Cup in 1969, and they won the old First Division title in the 68 to 69 season. Leeds, and then we went into the 1970s. That's when Leeds became the most fearsome team in the old First Division. They used to be challenging for everything, like I've said. And the FA Cup as well, they were beaten by Liverpool in the 1965 final in extra time when they lost 2-1. And then they played Chelsea in the 1970 final. That was a brutal final. They kicked lumps out of one another. Of course, back then in the old First Division, there was no yellow and red cards. If there had been, there wouldn't have been any Leeds or Chelsea players left on the pitch. They'd have all been sent off. And of course, final ended 2-2, and he'd had to go to a replay at Old Trafford. And that was another brutal final. That was. In that one, Leeds and Chelsea players kicked lumps out of one another. They literally kicked lumps out of one another. And the goal scorers of that night, and of course Chelsea won the cup won the replay. And the goal scorers were Mike Jones, he scored for Leeds, and then Peter Osgood equalised for Chelsea. It went to extra time, and David Webb scored the winner for Chelsea. Like I've said, that was a brutal final. And if you want to watch that, you look it up on YouTube. You see how brutal both finals were. Because Leeds and Chelsea, they used to hate one another. Whenever they played one another in the old First Division, it used to be absolutely brutal. They used to hate one another. And of course, in the 1970s, Leeds were again challenging for trophies, but they didn't. They in the 1970-71 season, they didn't win anything. They were challenging for the league, the old First Division title, which Arsenal won that season, the 70-71 season. Arsenal did the double that season. They won the old league, the old First Division, and they won the FA Cup. They beat Liverpool in the 1971 Cup final 2-1. It went to after extra time. But Leeds, they used to be challenging for everything. And I've mentioned the 1970-71 uh, First Division. That was won by Arsenal. Leeds finished second, and Leeds were chasing Arsenal to win it, and Arsenal won it in the end. And of course, who's who can forget when Leeds played Albion towards the end of that season, and Albion beat them, and that was a dubious match. That was because Albion won 2-1, and The goal which Tony Brown scored shouldn't have stood. It was offside. But the linesman and the referee gave the goal. And of course, as Barry Davies, who was a famous football commentator, said, Leeds will go mad, and they did. And they was robbed of a chance to win the old First Division trophy. And like I've said, Leeds then in the 70s, they were the most dominant team to ever. They came close many times to winning trophies, but they never do it. They was always seemed to be wanting to win the one trophy they couldn't win, was the old European Cup. They challenged for that, but they couldn't win it in the 68-69 season. Like I've said at the beginning of the video, Celtic beat them, and they lost again in the 1975 final to Bayern Munich. And of course, the Leeds fans started to riot. Like I've said, Don Revie was the manager then, and he left Leeds in 1974 to for the England job. But like and of course Leeds' most famous FA Cup final defeat was against Sunderland. Leeds won it the year before in 1972 when they beat Arsenal 1-0 with Alan Clark scoring the only goal. And the following year in 1973, they lost to Sunderland, who were in the old second division. They lost to Sunderland 1-0. And of course, after Don Revie left in 1974, Brian Clough took over as Leeds manager. Unfortunately for Brian Clough, he didn't last long at Leeds. I think he was only there for about 44 days and he was gone. I think the Leeds players didn't like him, didn't like his way, his discipline. So the Leeds players must have got together and spoke to the chairman of Leeds United at the time. I don't know who he was, and told him, say, look, we can't work under him, so you'll have to get rid of him. And they did. And of course, Don Revie went on to be England's manager in 1974, and that didn't work out. He was a terrible England manager. And of course, when Leeds sacked Brian Clough, they were looking for another manager, and they turned to Jimmy Armfield of Blackpool. They brought him in to manage Leeds. And of course, they then, towards from 74 up until 79, we were to the end of the 70s, and Leeds were not the dominant team anymore. All their big name players, like I've said, were all thinking about retiring. Johnny Giles, well, he went on to be playing manager of Albion in 75-76 season. That's when Albion won promotion from the old second division. And Johnny Giles was going to leave Albion at the start of the 76-77 season, but I think the Albion board persuaded him to stay, but he only stayed there 2 seasons. So that's the end of my history of Leeds United. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I shall be uploading another history of a old First Division team again tomorrow. I'll see you then.